Good morning and welcome to our webinar, the Ohio Department of Transportation Business and Workforce Development webinar, July 7th, 2026, on soft skills, the untapped power to make or break your team. My name is Micah Flanagan, and I'd like to welcome you to the webinar. We have, as you can see on the screen, a series of business development webinars as well as workforce development webinars this summer from May 5th through September 29th. So take a look at those and please register. Our mission at the Ohio Department of Transportation is to support the state highway system and support the state highway transportation system and promote transportation initiatives statewide. As more than $3 billion per year enterprise, ODOT invests the bulk of its resources in system preservation through maintenance, construction, and snow and ice operations. Our Small Business and External Workforce Development Division is led by Deborah Green, our Deputy Director, as well as Jolita Stoltz, the Office of Business Services, Small Business Services, Katie LaPlace, the Office of Contractor Compliance, and Lynn Stevens with the Office of Outreach. So on the screen, you can see the various areas, the sections in those offices. Our Office of Outreach contacts are on the screen. You can see the Office of Outreach is divided into different areas among the state of Ohio. So if you have questions or need more information, please contact your appropriate regional outreach manager. My name again is Micah Flanagan, the Supportive Services Manager at the Ohio Department of Transportation, handling workforce development initiatives, training and development, e-learnings, federal and state grant money. We do some RFPs and do various projects to enhance workforce development and build employment pipelines throughout the state of Ohio for heavy highway transportation projects. Also, we have Christie Engler of New Day HR LLC. I'm introducing her on the next slide. So welcome, Christie. We are very excited to hear what you have to talk about today.
Thanks, Micah. I'm so glad to be here today with everybody and talk about some soft skills in the workplace. I know that's a topic that is high, getting a lot of volume right now, but also something that we don't always embrace and don't always love to talk about. So we're going to try to make it as fun and painless as possible today.
Well, great. We're very excited to see your presentation today. So the stage is yours.
Apologize. Okay, there we go. Hopefully everybody can see the screen. Again, thank you so much for having me today, Micah and the team. Really excited to be a part of this and to support all of those of you who are helping to make transportation in our state possible. And those of us that drive or go anywhere, we all see the work that everyone does, and we're all grateful for it. So I want to thank everybody for that. So just a little bit about me so you kind of understand where I'm coming from. So again, I'm Christie Engler. I am a 20-year HR hands-on practitioner, and I primarily work with small businesses that need the HR help without the HR hire. And so I've worked primarily in the outsourcing space and really a lot of multi-generation family-owned businesses, which are some of my favorite to work with, and primarily in construction, manufacturing, engineering, logistics are some of my favorite industries. So then I just like to share a little bit about my why and why I do what I do. And, the people that you see on the left there are my why, my husband and my two amazing daughters. And we all have a reason why we do what we do and why we go to work. And this is mine. And I like to share that. So But my company is called New Day HR. And I'll give you all of my contact information at the end. Feel free to reach out to me if there's any questions or anything that I can support you in your business. So what I want to talk about today is what are soft skills? It's a little bit of a buzzword. It's being floated around a lot. But when we hear that phrase, what are we actually talking about? So this really great article, and I've given you the link here at the bottom, came from Forbes, and it talked about the top soft skills that will be needed in the workforce and the things that a lot of employers are really going to be looking for, especially in the next generation of the workforce. So if you look down at this list, you can kind of see, okay, these are a lot of skills that we don't necessarily teach, right? And people come to work, they learn how to do the job. These are kind of things that are more inherent to each individual. These are the things that they either have or don't have. They've built and grown through their careers and through their life experience. But these are things that, if we really stop and think about it, these are really important things that we want our people to have and to possess. And so I really want to focus today on just a couple that really stand out and tend to be the most important ones. So why are soft skills important at work, right? People come to work, they do the job, you train them, they're the best in the field, they're superior in their work, they're productive. So why in the world do we care if they have these soft skills or not? You may be thinking it. You may have had this conversation in your office. So I want you to think about any recent customer service experiences that you've had. And friends, I will tell you that in the last week alone, I had to call my bank and I had to call my internet provider. These are not calls that any of us look forward to making, right? You know that you have to put aside a good chunk of time because you don't know how long you're going to be on hold and have to listen to the lovely hold music. But ultimately, you don't know if your problem is going to be solved because you don't know if the person on the other end of the phone, when you get through the bots and all the automated questions, you don't know if the person that you talk to is actually going to be able to help you or if they're going to want to help you and what their attitude's going to be and what kind of day they're going to be having. And so these are not things that we look forward to generally, right? So I can say that of the two calls, one was extremely positive and the one not so much. But what made it so was really the approach that the individuals who I was speaking with took. One was extremely empathetic to the situation, extremely helpful, took the time. I felt like they were actually listening to me. And we were able to actually have good dialogue and they were actually able to help me. The other I felt like was rushing through and really just kind of giving me the script, right? I'm calling with a very specific problem and you're still trying to sell me stuff. It was the wrong approach. It made it for a frustrating experience. So these are the kinds of things that we encounter right in our lives. So which of those situations do you think I'm going to tell people about? Right? When I'm talking to, my friends and family and hey, I've had a recent interaction with so and so company. Oh, let me tell you about the call that I just had, kind of thing. You're more likely to talk about your negative experiences and to share those than your positive. So if you think about that and think about recent interactions that you've had, take a minute and think about what do your clients, your customers, your vendors, your partners experience when they interact with your people? Is it positive? Are people being made to feel good? Are they walking away with what they actually needed when they reached out to begin with, right? Or are they not having such a great experience? So think about that and how that actually works in your organization. Because when soft skills are actually working, I can tell you that for the most part, things are good in organizations. You have employee retention. And in case you didn't know, the average cost in this country to just bring somebody in the door, not talking about salary, not talking about benefits, about actually even paying somebody yet, just recruiting someone into your organization costs about $40,000. So every time you go through that recruitment process, think about 40 grand that you're spending. So what kind of experience are they having through that? And what kind of soft skills could make that experience even better in your organization? When it's going well, again, you have retention. People are staying. They're having a good time. They're enjoying it. They have engagement and morale that are good, that are positive. They're saying great things about you. If you haven't looked online, and I'm sure that a lot of you have, what do your reviews look like? And those are definitely influenced by the experiences that people are having as they interact with your folks. Your customer satisfaction is probably through the roof. If you have people who are empathetic, who are actually demonstrating strong leadership, who are really communicating and collaborating. Your people are probably quite productive and getting it done and also being innovative, thinking outside the box. They have that autonomy, they're sharing, and things are really, really good. We have to be concerned about our reputations in this day and age, and especially because of this wonderful thing we have called social media. As soon as you have a negative experience somewhere, it usually ends up online. That's where a lot of people go to that's their outlook and they share their frustrations. Hopefully, you're having really good experiences in that and your reputation is solid online and on paper. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when soft skills are working in your organization, you are bringing in significant revenue and you're seeing the profit and you're actually achieving the goals that you've set out for your organization. So this is why these things are truly important. And there's a lot of studies that have been done and a lot of cases that have shown organizations successful when they engage in the soft skills as opposed to those who do not. So another kind of common debate that you might have about, soft skills at work is, why is this important? Because work is just work, and we should just come to work and do our thing and then leave and leave it all behind. At the end of the day, that's a lot easier said than done. Work is very important, and for a lot of us, and I'm thrilled to be able to be a person in this boat. I feel like the work that I do with companies like yours, this is my passion and purpose. This is why I'm here. I'm supposed to be doing this, supporting and helping organizations to become the best that they can be. And for a lot of us, we feel that way about our work. I worked with a company for many years that does bathroom and kitchen remodeling and installs, and worked with a gentleman who, I mean, he was in that business, 30 some years, primarily as an installer, and he loved it. And he would sit down and tell you, he'd share the stories and he would talk about just how passionate he was about his work. And he loved, doing that install work and then seeing that finished product and how happy it made people. And, that's an amazing thing when people actually feel that way. And at the end of the day, we all have to make a living and we all have to pay bills and take care of our families and have our lives. So work is important and it is personal, and we need to shift our thinking to feel that way so that we can then embrace all of these types of things like engaging in soft skills. So across the board, what do you think is the number one complaint of employees? And this is all surveys, all employee anything across the globe every year. It's the same thing. And normally most people think it's pay or it's, something around compensation. Um, Actually, the number one complaint is communication. Every single time. It never fails. It is constant. And so this is the primary soft skill that I really want to focus on today because it is the number one complaint of employees. I hear employees all the time saying they don't feel like they know what's going on. They feel like they're in the dark. They're not a part of the overall goals and the mission, and they don't see where they fit in. Um, they feel like most organizations are horrible with communicating any kind of change, and it's a real struggle. It's a real problem. And then at the same time, as owners and leaders, you feel like well, are we sharing too much? We don't want to get ourselves into, a tight situation there. How much do we share? What does transparency look like for us? Um, so let's talk about some best practices and some things around communication. So there's a lot of challenges with communicating in your organization, and you may be experiencing a lot of these right now. The pandemic threw us for a loop, and in a lot of ways, there were a lot of really wonderful, positive things that came out of it. And we're still adjusting and we're still learning how to operate in this new world and kind of this new environment. The first one is remote and hybrid work arrangements can be really difficult to communicate with people. Um, Not seeing everybody necessarily all the time, not, really having a common place physically to be, always being on Zoom, always being on, in a virtual setting can really make communication very, very difficult. And not everybody is good at it from the employee side and from the management side. So, how do we combat that? At the end of the day, we have 5 generations in the workplace, and that's not going anywhere. And communicating within those different generations can be very difficult. People in different stages like to communicate differently. Where we struggle is, for the most part, not taking the time to ask people, how do you like to be communicated with? You know, um, so that's definitely a challenge. A lot of organizations are still harping on the that's how we've always done it. And so, even though the pandemic happened and taught us a lot of things, and there were a lot of lessons to be learned out of that, there are still a lot of organizations that are swimming against, going against the current and against the grain and trying to maintain this is what we've always had. So, that can be a real challenge. If your overall culture does not really support communication, does not support openness and transparency, you're going to struggle. And, culture comes from the top. Culture is this is how we actually do things here. It's the behavior that's allowed. So think about that, and where does your culture fit in terms of communication? There's, for a lot of people, they just don't know any other way. Um, as far as how to communicate with people, um, keeping things under, lock and key. I still hear from a lot of owners who say, that's just kind of how it's always been. We don't share the finances with our employees. Um, but we don't know any other way to do it. So let me help you find some other ways to do it. And then you also have managers who, quite frankly, do not want to manage people. And management's not inherent for everybody. For the most part in our society, if you want to advance in your career and you want to climb that ladder, you almost always have to take on some kind of management role. But it's not everybody's thing. And I've had a lot of people who are so frustrated and just become very down from the management side of their role. They love what they do, they're fantastic at it, but it's the managing people side that has them so stressed out, so frustrated. They just don't know how to do these things. And most companies do not train managers on how to actually manage people. So you may have some managers who are, maybe behaving in certain ways, and it's simply because they don't want to be doing what they're doing. And the management of people may be giving them such anxiety that it comes out in negative ways. So these may be a variety of the communication challenges that you may be experiencing. So I like quotes. I like to learn from people who came before me, and just some great people out in the world who have shared their wisdom. So most people have heard of John Maxwell. If you haven't, I encourage you to give him a Google. But one of his quotes is, "Tend to the people, and they will tend to the business." And so the more you take care of your folks and actually show, some empathy, develop that strong leadership, really commit to communicating, they will take care of the business, and they will shine, and they will do exactly what you need them to do. And so, but it starts at home, and really, really making sure that your people are happy, engaged, and quite frankly, if they're not, also helping people who are not a strong fit to also move on and get out, and find their real passion and purpose. So let's just talk about some best practices for, communicating. Being as open and available as possible. What I find from a lot of managers is that, again, most managers are working managers. So they're not just managing people. They are, you're also either running the full business, they have their own quotas they have to hit, in addition to managing other people. So make sure that people know how to get a hold of you. What are your office hours? Can they navigate your calendar to know how to get a hold of you? Same for any manager in your organization. Make sure that you have some kind of open door, open floor policy, but at the same time that you have the boundaries put up. We don't want everybody coming in and bursting in at every moment and causing, constant slowdown. We want, hey, this is when we have office hours. This is when, I address my emails. This is when I'm happy to schedule calls or in-person meetings. Make sure that everybody knows that. Again, in that whole complaints on the side of the employees, it's that they don't know, and no one tells them, and so they just take it upon themselves to come and find you. So put it out there. Hey, this is the best way to get a hold of me. Trying to be as calm as possible and just kind of keeping a cool head. Now, we have all had this situation. Somebody comes at you hot, right? Something just happened and somebody is mad, for whatever reason, and they want to talk about it right now and they want to deal with it right now. And for a lot of people in management leadership, they feel like they have to stop and drop everything right then and deal with it. In truth, you're not going to have probably the best outcome at that moment because it just happened. This person is hot and emotions are running very, very high. So give this a try. Say, okay, let's pull this person aside. All right, I can see that you're upset. Something just happened. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go for a walk. If you have a large building or a campus, go lap it a couple times. Go around the block, whatever. Come back and sit down and write down what just happened. Try to take some of the emotion out of it and really get to the facts. Here's what just took place. Why is this person so upset? Get dates and times and names and as much as detail as they can possibly share, but get them to write it down because it really helps to take that emotion out of that moment. Let's just get to the facts so that we can actually deal with the situation. And then tell them, hey, I can talk to you about this at 2 o'clock. I'm going to send you a meeting invite right now. Do right there on your phone, probably your laptop, tablet, that you're walking around with, and say, hey, we're going to talk about this at 2 o'clock. Or, maybe it's the next morning. But do what works well for you. And again, this is about putting up those boundaries, but so that the person knows they're being heard and you're definitely going to address it. But you don't have to stop everything you're doing right in that moment to deal with this situation simply because they're frustrated, right? Or, it's a pretty serious situation from their perspective. And not that it's not, but it probably is not going to bring the company to a halt in that moment. So let's deal with it when we can really properly deal with it and really get down to brass tacks and truly address the issue. So try that. Encourage your leaders to take that approach, instead of constantly having to put out fires. Let's be a little more proactive. Being as confidential and discreet, as we possibly can is extremely important when we talk about management and leadership. However, there will be times when someone will come to you and say, hey, I want to talk to you off the record. We in HR get this a lot, and that's fine, except that if we start to have a conversation around things like discrimination, harassment, anything that could be looked at as a legality issue, now I can't promise anonymity. So I tell people that up front. So when they come in and they shut the door and, hey, I want to talk to you off the record, okay, that's fine. But just know, based on whatever it is that you're going to tell me, we may go down a path, and I may not be able to promise that you're going to stay anonymous in this. So just know that, and then you decide if you would like to continue or not. Because sometimes in the interest of safety, and certainly in the interest of legal things, sometimes the anonymity is not an option. So just make sure that you're sharing that. You know, just being prepared, encouraging your leaders to really think through their meeting and their meeting practices. Do you have an agenda? Do you have a point to this meeting, or could this have been an email? Um, most meetings I find are the latter. They definitely could have been an email, and you don't have to have a meeting just to have a meeting. So really encouraging everybody to just be prepared, use the best use of time and resources that we possibly can. Your managers and your leaders in your organization probably are missing out on one of the greatest resources at their disposal, which is each other. They're not on an island. They don't have to be alone in their managing of other people. Chances are you have folks who have been in management for quite some time, and maybe you have some newer leaders. Encourage them to talk and use each other. Hey, I need to have a really difficult conversation with somebody. Can I role play it with you for 10 minutes? Here's what I'm thinking about saying. What do you think? Does this resonate with you? Should I use other words? Help them to use each other when they are dealing with especially really difficult, tricky employee issues. They should be working together. We want to be empathetic. We want to maintain professionalism as much as possible. Make sure that especially your leaders, know what that means to you in your organization. What is professionalism here? How do we define that? It's not really a universal term. So make sure that we have that. But leaders are allowed to be empathetic. You're allowed to be human. You're allowed to show that you care. Quite honestly, employees will respond better and more if you do show that side. On the other hand, work is not necessarily a democracy. And sometimes you have what I like to call the squeaky wheels, right? Sometimes you have folks who are just never happy at all, constantly questioning things to the point of not trying to be helpful, not trying to be productive. They're simply questioning things, again, pushing against that grain. So sometimes we need to have that difficult conversation with an employee that says, "Hey, you don't really seem very happy here. It seems like you don't agree with most things that are going on." For the most part, barring anything illegal, companies can run as they see fit. You're allowed to run your company the way that it works for you. If a person doesn't agree with that, that's totally fine. It's probably just not a fit. You don't have to turn your company on its head to try to please everybody, and especially one or two. And you're allowed to do it the way that you want to do it, that is best. And there's just some people who just aren't, they're not going to agree, and they're probably just not going to be a fit. It doesn't have to be contentious. It doesn't have to be a big to do to exit a person in that situation. But I will tell you that it's important to make the change, because they're probably making the rest of your employees very unhappy. Unfortunately, that toxicity is really difficult to navigate in the workplace. The thing that really stinks about these situations is that a lot of times your squeaky wheels are some of your top performers. And so it would be really, really difficult to let some of these folks go, but you really have to think about how they're fitting into the organization and how this is affecting your culture. Okay. And so again, the phrase that I use is, are the inmates running the prison? Are your managers being walked all over? Do they not have the resources and the support and the tools to know how to deal with people and with these different personalities and situations? If they don't, let's get that for them. There's a lot of resources that I'll actually be sharing during this presentation, and happy to address questions outside of this as well. So, but feel free to meet people where they are. Again, everything does not have to be a meeting for the sake of having a meeting. At one point in my career, I was leading a team. I had two remote people. One said, "Hey, I'd like to have maybe a once a month kind of touch base, 15, 20 minutes tops. Doesn't have to be a big to do. I had another person who wanted a weekly one-on-one, with a short agenda, 30 minutes. I did what worked for each of them because I needed to meet them where they are and I could still see their productivity and knew if things were happening well or not. That wasn't how I was able to measure productivity, in those meetings. There should be other ways to do that. But there's no point in having a meeting just to have a meeting. And so meet people where they are, ask them what's best for them. How do you want to communicate? How do you want to meet? And because that manager and employee relationship will make or break the employment experience 100% every time. Most of us can think of a time when we've left a bad boss. So think about that. So just a few more things that your managers and leaders can do. Establish ground rules for their teams. These are not necessarily things that you're going to find in the employee handbook, nor should they be. Every manager should establish their own set of rules. Work hours and breaks. Hey, for our team, this is how it works. These are the best ways to maintain productivity and make sure that everybody gets their breaks and that we're all on the same page in this department. What are our performance standards? What are we actually looking to achieve here? When we do have meetings, what do we expect as far as attendance and etiquette? And is everybody on their phones? Are we putting laptops away? If we are meeting virtually, what's our camera feelings, right? Some people do not enjoy being on camera. Doesn't mean that they're not participating. It's can be another reason. So, but putting those things out there. What are the communication protocols? If I send out a meeting, or an email to my team, do I expect response within 1 business day, 2 business days? Depending on what it is, maybe it's shorter, maybe it's longer, but make sure that people understand that and that they know up front. What are our priorities and decision making in this team, in this group, in this department? How do we do that? And how do we distribute our workload? So encourage your managers to really establish their ground rules and make sure that they kind of put it out there for everybody. And this is another great way where one manager could share theirs with another and they could work together and say, hey, this really works for my team. Okay, well, that won't work for my team, but here's what I'm thinking, and bounce those ideas off of each other. Really making sure that not only as a company do we have goals and objectives, but what about the team? What about the department? Do we know what we're working towards? Again, that communication that employees are complaining about, they don't understand where they fit in. What part of what they're doing is contributing to the overall objectives and the goals? How are we reaching these things? And what kind of timeline do we see for meeting some of these goals and objectives? And then how does that flow into the larger organization? These are things you can very easily and quickly share with your folks, and you're not necessarily giving away the farm and explaining everything in detail, but just helping people understand where they fit in and where their contributions matter. Having an action plan. Again, here's our goals, here's who's involved. Especially if it's a cross-departmental kind of thing, how do we understand where the other team members come into play, and how does that work? What do we expect from a results and outcomes standpoint? How are we going to get there? What are the steps that we absolutely have to take? And again, what's the timeline? Is this a current 6-month project? Is this something that's going to take several years? We really need to put that out there so that people understand kind of where we're coming from. And if there is going to be some type of incentive tied to some of these things, 100% share that. When folks know that something is coming and something is tied to an outcome, the more the merrier, right? And definitely the more engagement and morale that you'll get. So how do we go about developing soft skills at work, right? You're thinking, I know my people. Some of them have been doing this for 30 some years, and they are who they are, and they're not necessarily going to change or be different. I understand that. I completely appreciate that on all levels. So part of being a leader, being a manager, is really accepting a challenge to be something more than average. I love this quote by Jim Rohn. It really is difficult. It really is hard. And like I said before, not everybody is up to the task of managing and leading, as well as, you know, being an individual contributor and sharing in the productivity. So acknowledging the difficulty for your people, I think, is huge. Actually telling everybody, hey, it's okay if this part stinks, right? It's okay if this situation is difficult. We'll get through it together, kind of thing. Really just planning for people's development. Thinking about, when we're training in the moment, we're talking about a specific task, a specific software, a specific duty that, piece of equipment. When we talk about developing people, we're really talking about what's next. What's the next stage? What's the next steps for their career and for the company? And really thinking about our succession planning and think about that in terms of every level of your company. Who are your key players at every level? And if something happened to that person, they decided to leave tomorrow, where does that leave us? And so that's really the succession planning that all organizations should be addressing. It's not just about the person at the very top or, the ownership or sale of the business. It's really about who are our key people and what happens if a change occurs, especially something that's out of our control. So really think about, and ask your people to think about where they are, consider their position. Are you satisfied in your management place, or do you need some development? And do we need to talk about what's next? Ask them, how do they learn best? Because everybody learns differently. And I can tell you, for every book that gets put in front of leadership teams, nowadays there's a podcast, there's a blog, there's a YouTube video. There's other ways to learn, and we should definitely acknowledge that. And in some of the tools that I'll be sharing at the end, every single one of them has multiple different mediums that work for people. But ask your team, how do you learn best, and how can we get you what you need? Ask everybody to consider whether it's every month, every quarter, what's one thing you'd like to improve upon, right? Again, just looking at that training versus development a little bit differently. And then there's some other concepts around developing emotional intelligence, becoming an emotional scientist, having a no ego, leadership mindset, and some tools that I'll share there. One of the things that I think organizations could really benefit from is asking for feedback from the employees on their managers. How is your manager doing? No one ever asks that question. It's never on any engagement surveys. It's never usually a part of anything in the performance management process. Ask your people that. How is this person doing? Do you like their management style, their communication style? One thing that managers are usually kind of going at it in the dark because they don't have any feedback. They have nothing to go on. So think about maybe incorporating that somewhere so that your managers can have some kind of data and some kind of feedback to work from. Hey, maybe this is something that I need to be a little bit better at. Maybe I'm not being as empathetic. Maybe I do need to collaborate more instead of just going ahead with my own idea. So think about some of those things. And another really great exercise for leaders to go through, think about the best boss you've ever had and think about the worst one. And what made them so? What made them really good or what made it really bad? And then think about, where would my people say that I am now? And where do I want to be? Do I want to be on that somebody's really good, the best boss list, or am I headed for, for the worst boss list? Where do you want to be? How important is that to you? And what kinds of things can we reflect on from our previous experiences to help us be better today? So really, really think about the development of your leaders and how that can enhance the employment experience for everybody. So just some basic team management skills that would be really, really helpful. Making sure that your leaders know their people. Do you know who's in your company? Do you know anything about them? Have personal conversations. Get out from behind the desk and open the door and invite people in and go out on the floor and talk to folks. What's going on in their lives? It's really, really wonderful to get to a point where you know what's going on in people's lives and you can actually make a difference, and they don't need you to solve all of their problems. They just need somebody to listen, but to understand that they're more than just a number and more than just a cog in the wheel. Making sure that everybody understands the work requirements. What are we actually trying to do here? What are we really trying to achieve? And again, it's not just about somebody coming in heads down doing a job and then leaving at the end of the day. And particularly as you are starting to recruit the newer, younger workforce generations into your companies, they want to know. They want to know where they stand and how what they're doing makes a difference to the organization. So making sure that everybody understands that. Making sure that we are planning and we're prioritizing and that we know who needs to be doing what. And so, it's easy for people to get caught up in daily tasks and not focusing on the bigger picture. Managers need to be able to help folks get out of their own way, and how do we plan and prioritize for what's coming down the pike, right? Do we have a big order coming? Do we have a new client that we need to address? And that's going to shift how we do some things, making sure that everybody understands that and is prepared for that. That clear and consistent guidance. Again, asking people what's the best way to communicate with you? Are you an email person? Are you a phone person? Do we need to write everything down? Is that just, make it a little easier? Just making sure that we are clear and consistent in our guidance, and that, because one of the things that can also really damage management is when employees figure out that they can go answer shop among your leaders. Everybody needs to be consistent. They need to be on the same page. They may not always agree, but they need to be on the same page. And then just making sure that our managers know how to treat employees fairly and equitably. There is some employment law that needs to be understood on that. Managers do have individual legal liability in some cases, more so than just being covered by the company. So making sure that our managers and our leaders know some of these key team management skills. Again, we talked a little bit about the multi-generational workforce. It's here to stay. It's going to keep growing as people are actually putting off retirement, and then we've got our new younger folks in the workforce that are joining. So we have to figure out how to bridge those generation gaps, and it's really about setting expectations and developing those open lines of communication is really the two main things that managers have to do to really be successful bridging the generations. And again, just being very clear and really making sure that we're consistent in that the messaging is very, very key. There's another quote that I love from the great Steve Jobs, but he said, my job is not to be easy on people. My job is to take these great people that we have and push them and make them even better. And it's really, again, about that development. It's not just about training in the moment. It's about developing people and thinking about what's next and leaving the organization, better than you found it, and really helping people to find their passion and purpose in this life. And so I feel like this is a good quote for that. So when we again, managing and leading people is really, really difficult, and as people are developing those soft skills and you're prioritizing what types of things you want to bring into your organization and how you want your leaders to develop, also take a minute to think about, we want to avoid burning out our folks, and we make sure that everybody is taking care of themselves. And so really just focusing on, does everybody have balance, right? I was talking with a plant manager just this last week, and he told me that it has been a year since he has taken more than one day off in succession. And that's not okay. There's nobody who is running at their optimum if they are never taking time. And so we're going to make him take time off because it's important. And, it doesn't have to be a full week. I said, can you give me a 4-day weekend? Can you pick a Monday and a Friday to take off somewhere between now and October 1st? And he said, okay, I will, I'll look at the calendar and I'll do that. But it's just about having that balance, right? Helping and encouraging people to chase their passion and purpose in life. What else are you doing besides work? What else are you passionate about? Um, and even when your work is your passion, like I feel like that for myself, there has to be other things, right? And it all culminates to make us the wonderful and amazing and messy people that we are. Just helping folks to remember what's truly important, what is really important, to give thanks for what we have, and for people to give themselves grace. Again, managing people is hard. People are difficult. They don't come in all sunny and shiny and happy and getting along all the time, right? So give yourself grace, give your managers grace, and acknowledge that this is hard. Assume positive intent. There's a lot of people who unfortunately take a very just kind of negative view of employees and assuming the worst. I was working with an organization and they were really struggling with this. And so we printed this phrase just on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper and we put it everywhere in there. I was on the restroom door, it was throughout the warehouse, in the offices, and it just said assume positive intent. And, we did that one evening and then everybody came in the next day, and there was a lot of really positive conversation around that phrase. And they went, huh, we're not doing this. A lot of us are really bad about this. We're just assuming the worst. We're thinking that people are not doing their best, and we really need to give more grace. Most people are trying their hardest, and they're trying to do well. And again, they may just be in the wrong spot, and that's okay too. Again, we need to have those difficult conversations when it's time to exit somebody, but really assuming positive intent and making that a part of your culture is a really key piece. Sometimes managers just need to say no. They have enough on their plate, and they cannot take on another thing, and they're not going to be able to do it well. And so allowing people to do that and having that autonomy to say, look, I can't take on another thing. Can we figure out another way? Allowing that to be okay in your organization is very important. At the same time, delegating. You've always got folks who they take so much pride in what they do that they don't trust anybody else. And so they won't let anybody else touch something. Well, you're probably not going to be around forever. Okay. We love you, key employee, but you've got to teach other people how to do it. And we would love for you to be able to take a day off, right? And somebody else can handle it and it's going to be okay. And so putting that culture of delegation in is really key, and just helping people understand that it's okay. It's all right. It doesn't make you less of a person. It doesn't make you less of an employee, but we cannot have all the eggs in one basket. And every time we do that, and especially in smaller organizations, it burns us every time. So really encouraging people to delegate and ask for help. And we all have those folks who it's just impossible for them. It's really struggle with asking for help, feel like they should be able to do it all themselves. There's no awards for that, right? There's no trophies for not asking for help, and feeling like you have to do it all on your own. So these are the types of things that the leader of an organization, the owner of a company, should be setting the tone for from a culture perspective. So help your folks to navigate some of these things so that they are avoiding that burnout and taking care of themselves. So as promised, I have a number of resources and tools. Now, for the most part, most of these are books. However, all of these folks have blogs, YouTube channels, um, you know, TED Talks that they've done. There's all kinds of other things that you can utilize. If you find yourself stuck or you want some additional resources in any of these areas for your people, feel free to reach out to me at any time, and I'm happy to give you a good list of other types of things. Few of these folks are local here to us in Ohio, and which is really fun. but these are just really great resources that I have found for people over the years, especially those who are managing and leading and owning companies. So I want to say thank you again for being with us today. It's been fantastic. This QR code you can actually scan and get all of my contact information. Please reach out. Happy to help. And let's talk about how I can support your organizations as you support the transportation in the great state of Ohio. So thank you again to Micah and the team and the committee for having me on here today. And hope everybody has a fantastic rest of the week.
All right. Thank you so much, Christy. That was an excellent presentation. Christy is a servant leader, if there ever was one, let me tell you. Phenomenal HR professional, wealth of information. I know you can find her on LinkedIn and her company on LinkedIn. So, like she said, if you have questions, please reach out. And if you guys have questions today on the call, any questions out there, put those in the Q&A and we can answer those. I know, in building workforce pipelines, it starts with your people at your company. We have a lot of contractors who work with ODOT to get our work done. So it starts with the people who work for the contractors and taking care of them first so that they can do the good work to tra build our transportation projects. So we appreciate, everything everyone here on the call is doing as well. So any questions today?
I don't see any questions in the Q&A. Micah?
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Christy, for your time today and the wealth of information. It was really good. So our next webinar will be on Tuesday, July 21st, successful partnerships between prime contractors and subconsultants on Ohio transportation projects. So thank you so much for everyone who attended, and thank you, Christy, for your time today. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much.